What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Happy New Year. This is the first of January 2024, and our good friend to kick off the year is kind enough to join us, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, and of course, Broad Street South Network. And I'm wondering if you kind of turn back the clock and maybe you get rid of that display yesterday at the link by the Philadelphia Eagles in a shocking, horrible loss to a very lowly Arizona Cardinals fan and in essence team. And in essence, Lloyd, that loss pretty much knocks the Eagles out of any shot of getting home field advantage and potentially now drops them to the 5 seed where you might actually have to go on the road now for a playoff game. First and foremost, appreciate a couple moments. Happy New Year. And what did you take away from yesterday's loss, a bad one by the Philadelphia Eagles, 35-31 against Arizona?
Happy New Year to you. And it's a very bad loss that the Eagles had to the Cardinals. It's shocking. They probably thought, okay, up at halftime, 14-6, that this game was in hand. They have that 100-yard interception return, et cetera. But as always, we talk about this defense and their inability to close out games. And that was the biggest problem for this Eagles team. And now, as you said, if everything holds chalk next week, Dallas wins against Washington, the Eagles presumably win against the Giants or whatever, the Dallas will get the number 2 seed, and the road goes through Dallas in this division instead of the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's a very bad loss for them. So many holes and things that we talked about over the season, and it just reared its ugly head again. And particularly on third downs. Arizona was 5 of 10 on third downs, and they held the ball queue in this game for 39 minutes to like 20 something for the Eagles. So they just dominated the line of scrimmage, 449 total yards that they allowed the Cardinals. That's a 3-win, now 4-win team that they allowed that to. It just showed you the mess that the Eagles are in right now. Yes, they're the 5th seed, and they may luck up and play like the Bucks or the Saints, but they're just not ready to travel into the playoffs, even though they are a playoff team at this point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Hurts didn't play particularly well. The defense had major gaps. I mean, you think about that crazy 6 pick by Arizona by the Eagles. I mean, the Cardinals, Kyler Murray kind of ill-advised, throw it up there. But again, he turns around 3 touchdown passes, one on 4th down late in the game, another with a one-hander from Connor. I mean, you can talk about the defense, you can talk about the laps, you can talk about how they're letting guys get in the secondary, in the second level. I mean, like I said, Murray, where he beat you is with the legs, and he kept some drives alive. And the other thing that stood out yesterday is, and I believe you just mentioned it, when we start to talk about the third down conversions in the NFL, right? So Arizona's at 50%. They've given up 36 something odd points to the Giants in Arizona. If you go back, I have to pull up the stat, but it's as if though the way their defense is playing, it almost seems as though it's 40, 50, 60 points. I mean, very soft, bad tackling. They can't stop the run yesterday. And then, that last drive, and even offensively, I want to get to that for a moment too. I mean, you got a 3rd and 16 situation in that game, and then they decide to run a draw play. I mean, I've said it. I don't know how long I keep saying it when it comes to this head coach. If the head coach is not calling the plays, if the head coach is not motivating, if the head coach cannot get that locker room on the same page, then what the hell is the point of having the head coach?
Yeah, Q. At this point, Sirianni, I've had questions about him. Everybody kind of annoyed him. He made the Super Bowl last year, but we know last year the quarterbacks they faced in a soft schedule, everything really came together. And this year, you saw they're 10-1, and he's feeling good. He's beating his chest. He's saying all those things in front of the KC crowd, and I'm the greatest. Well, Q, now the adversity comes, and that's what it is in the National Football League. And you and I have been around this game a lot, covering it and teams and stuff. There's always going to be an ebb and flow to the season. There's going to be highs. There's going to be lows. Yes, they were 10-1, everything going great. But at a certain point, teams balled their fist up, and they were ready to fight this Philadelphia Eagles team. and they had no adjustments. And that starts with their head coach. He's all good about the rah-rah and the t-shirts and the faces and everything, but you have to make in-game adjustments. And it's just little things, it keeping your team focused. That's huge. You know what I mean? If they're a veteran team, which they are, they have a lot of guys that have been around, guys that won Super Bowl with the Eagles. Keep those guys focused. Keep those young guys eye on the prize. They
Yep.
should not be losing to a team like Arizona. I keep pointing, and I said this before you and I were talking. It's the same thing. Last year, they would have stepped on the throat
Yep.
of that Arizona team and blew them out, and then just had a laugher. But this year, they let them stick around, and they got too conservative, as you said, especially after that gift onside kick to get the ball around the 50-yard line. And he goes real conservative, runs with Gainwell up the middle, playing for the field goal. And then I don't know how you can put your trust in a defense led by now Matt Patricia that can't stop anybody. They're ranked like 29th overall. And you're like, wow, they're going to be a playoff team with a 29th ranked defense. And it's just an ugly situation for the Eagles at
They
this point.
they had a 1st and 20 at the Arizona 20-yard line. Okay. You had the offensive holding Jordan Malaha. Then you had Hertz to the 26 for 4 yards. Then you had 2nd and 16, and they went for -3. I think that was the sack by Baker, right? Or no, Hertz rolled out to his right. I was like, what are we doing here? Then you had 3rd and 19, as you alluded to, and it's a dink and dunk for 4 yards. They had to settle for the field goal. I mentioned this, I think maybe a month ago after the Kansas City game, that they have an AJ Brown problem. He's not on the same page as Jalen Hurts. He's not on the same page with the coaching staff. This is now, you had back-to-back weeks where he's elected to not speak to reporters. And then you had back-to-back weeks where the team decided we're going to have a players only meeting. So, Sirianni basically acknowledged that Brown was frustrated, ignored the part of the question about them speaking. So, to me, they've got an AJ Brown problem. They've got a Nick Sirianni problem. They have a locker room problem. You've got a very gifted and talented wide receiver. I know he wants his reps. I get it. But again, it's starting to manifest itself into a situation where you're almost getting into that uncommon territory, right? Where you can kind of sabotage a season. And I'm not going to sit here and say AJ Brown's a bad player. I'm not going to say AJ Brown is a bad character guy. That's not what I'm saying. He wants the football. He wants to be part of the offense. But with all that being said, it's a coaching staff's job to try to get him in the right position to make plays. But he also understands the ball's not always going to go his way every single solitary down.
He's got to understand that he is part of this team, and he's not the overall offense. You don't want to become a baby T.O., Terrell Owens, AB, guy like that. That's it's me. I need my stats. Everything runs through me. No, this team is driven by Jalen Hurts. We know this, and they paid him all that money for a reason to be the quarterback, the leader of this team, and AJ's becoming a distraction. Now the problem is they just lost Devontae Smith in this game for a little bit. He has they're not sure if it's a mid sprain or high ankle sprain, but he's definitely got an injury, and they got to figure out a way to get the ball to somebody other than those two receivers. So it's just a mess, Q. And the Eagles, unfortunately, when we talk about that NFL Films video, it's going to be they were 10-1, and then this happened.
Right, the 30 for 30 of a fraud choke job season. The fact that teammates are basically coming out and saying, hey, according to teammates, is more or less that he's got a problem with the coaching staff, so to speak. I mean, the refusal to talk to any member of the media is probably not a jab at the teammate or the media themselves, but rather at the coaching staff. This is what Marcus Hayes tweeted out and reported, courtesy of Marcus Hayes and Philly Inquirer. So that means he's, not on the same page. Look, at this point, you might have to go on the road for a playoff game. I mean, you lost what you needed to get back to the Super Bowl, and that was basically winning a division, having home field, having a home playoff game. More importantly, a bye. You win that divisional round matchup, you host the NFC Championship. And I know the Giants had they showed up but had some horrible play calling late in that game against the Rams. The Giants are not going to roll over. point being, you don't want to start 10-1 and then close a season 11-6, because now you're going and having dropped 5 of your last 6. And it's like, hey, we haven't been able to turn it on now. When?
And we always say you want to be playing your best football this time of the year. And they were playing their best football around, late October, November. That's all well and good and everything, but you have to keep your foot on the gas and keep your team together. And it starts with the head coach, the coordinators. So we talked about over and over again that's been a huge problem. Who's in charge of that offense? And then in terms of the defense, whether it's Desai, whether it's Patricia, they're just not pushing the right buttons. And then in terms of personnel, they are who they are at this point in the season. Their roster is not going to change. They got to make the adjustments with that staff, and these are winnable games. And early in the season, they could say they were fortunate, but they were finding ways to win these games. And now they're just spitting a bit at the end of the game. It's just it's like, all right, what's going on here? But
Yeah.
as you said, Q, not much of fix at this point, and now they're probably going on the road, and we'll just see if they can clean this mess up.
Thursday night, the Browns and Flacco once again 17 better than the Jets 37-20. And then Saturday, the other controversial game everyone's talking about, Detroit Lions and the Dallas Cowboys. Again, the 2-point conversion everyone's been talking about. Did the tackle, did he commit that he was eligible? Was there a disconnect with the referee? Were the officials not paying attention? Did Dan Campbell get a little too tricky? Did Dan Campbell realize just because I turned around and said it prior to the game, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to remember it during the game? But as it stands, first conversion try, Jared Goff hits a 13-yarder to Amon Ross St. Brown, and then he completes the pass to the lineman Taylor Decker. He was ruled to be an eligible receiver. They went for 2 again from the 7-yard line. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's Dan Campbell. And again, they were stopped on an interception that didn't reach the end zone because of a flag, which was offsides. They tried a third time. Jared Goff didn't lead the wide receiver, and that happens. Okay. The play itself in question, I read the pool report, and Decker reported to the official, and Dan Skipper was also the backup offensive tackle. Apparently, Jared Goff said did not. Skipper said he didn't report to an official. 2 players can't report to be eligible receivers on the same play. We know that. But if you watch the video clearly in the overhead shot, it appears that, again, Allen said Skipper reported to him as eligible, but then lined up in a tackle spot that didn't require him to report. And then Allen said Decker didn't report, but it clearly looked like he did report. So right away, we start with the rig. Everyone goes to the betting element. Everyone goes to the gambling element. The bottom line is maybe you can kind of call into question the second try of going for 2 from the 7, but be that as it may, where are you at with that play? And again, I know we talk about it for the past 20 years with the officiating. What do you do in a situation like this?
In terms of the fans on it, we saw what happened, and we know exactly how it should have been called and everything, and everybody else does, and they messed up, and unfortunately, it's a game-changing play because they converted it. That would have given them a 1-point victory. Dallas would lose, and then we were just talking about the Eagles and positioning and everything. Now Dallas gets his 2nd seed because what the Eagles did against Cardinals, and it's a huge opportunity now. They'll be hosting some games in Dallas where we know
Mm-hmm.
they're undefeated at this point in the season. But in terms of the call queue, I just thought it was egregious. Why not would they just quickly huddle together and say, you know what, he was eligible.
Yeah.
Let's not call this touching and then leave it at that. But they decided to change it. And then, as we know, the NFL, they're always going to circle the wagons around their guys and say, oh, they didn't mess it up. It's almost like that play, and I always talk about it was the Saints versus the Rams. The guy blows them up. Nobody calls it,
Sideline
and
play.
they move on, and that's what they're going to do here. They've already said this crew's not going to be part probably of the postseason. Brad Allen, who's that official there, his unit has been involved in a couple other games this season where there was non-calls and missed calls. So they need to grade these guys, let everybody know what their grades are, and just put it out there in the open. Not that I watch a lot of XFL or USFL games. They are doing a better job in terms of the eye in the sky than the NFL needs to in terms of these officiating crews.
Monday edition, New Year's Day edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich and Share. Lloyd Vance kind enough to join us. Hey, we partnered up with BetterHelp. We know the holidays just passed. We know it's a new year. It still can be very stressful. A new job. Maybe you're getting married. Maybe you're getting set to have a kid. You're transferring to a new location, what have you. Sometimes mental health takes a back seat. Do not allow to take a back seat. We are, BYP is partnering up with BetterHelp. Always back your play. And this is all you have to do. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. All you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/RichQ to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/RichQ. And as I mentioned, we are very happy to have that partnership, especially to start 2024. All right. So Dallas gets the win. San Francisco gets back on track. And then, it's crazy. I'm looking at yesterday, Miami is a 3-point dog against Baltimore, and Baltimore just literally ransacked. Baltimore ransacked San Francisco. They ransacked Miami. I know Miami had a bunch of injured players. I know Tua was throwing pick sixes all over the place. Baltimore was making ridiculous plays. Might as well just pencil on marker and Lamar Jackson is the NFL's MVP. But watching the games in the AFC play out yesterday, I still believe right now the team I still don't want to see is Buffalo. But do you believe Cleveland can go into Baltimore and beat Baltimore? And do you believe, hands down, far and away, Baltimore is the best team coming out of the AFC, let alone the NFL?
Well, at this point, Q, I'd say yeah, they are the top seed. The last 2 weeks, as you said, beating the Niners, beating the Dolphins in such dominating fashion, you have to say this team is the number one seed, and they deserve all their flowers in terms of the bye. And the road goes through Baltimore. But Q, there's always that big but there with Lamar. It's going to be, can he get it done when the games matter most? He's going to be a two-time MVP at this
Yep.
point, and guys of that ilk have always taken their teams on long runs into the postseason. He's got to get to the AFC Championship game at a minimum, and then go from there. But when he's in a quarterback matchup against like a Pat Mahomes or somebody like that, or Josh Allen, to me, I still got to think the other guy is going to be more efficient at playoffs. So they're doing well, very dominant fashion. Q. And the thing is, we've seen once again that Miami's exposed. And I think you talk about the Bills, who are a dangerous team. I think next week you're going to see the Bills go to Miami on Sunday Night Football, huge game, and win that game because the Dolphins are leaking oil. They're a lot like the Eagles in
Yep.
terms of they had that big early season league. They were peaking at a good time, but now they're getting guys injured, particularly Chubb, Xavier Howard. They lost Phillips earlier in the season, and then Waddle's not playing too much. So, a lot going on with these Dolphins, and they got physically dominated by the Ravens
Yeah.
yesterday.
We'll preview that game, obviously, later in the week. Buffalo opening line, lane 3, and that's for the AFC East. So everything's at stake in that game. And you just, as Boomer would say, you never write off Buffalo Bills, right? Circling the wagon. Jacksonville got back on top. We mentioned 49ers all over the Commanders. The Saints, look, give the Saints their due. Nice win over Tampa Bay. Texans with Stroud. Here we go. Quietly, we are about to kind of write off the Pittsburgh Steelers, and all of a sudden, boom, they get a big win over a team that was feeling pretty good about themselves with back-to-back crazy wins, pardon me, in the Seattle Seahawks. And that's a bad loss for Seattle because it really hinders their playoff opportunities. So they lose that one 30-23. Geno didn't play particularly poorly, but again, if you kind of look at that game, Pittsburgh's going to need a quarterback going forward, but they got the win. They've kept their playoff hopes alive, and they kind of went back to, and you can appreciate this, that Steeler type of smash mouth football. Warren had 75. Harris had a $122. They ran for 202. They averaged 4.4. You weren't asking Mason Rudolph to do a ton. He was only sacked once, but they really opened up some lanes and they exploited that run defense of Seattle.
It's good. And they're a physical team. And that's what Mike Tomlin built. And everybody hangs his hat on. Well, you got that ninth win a 17 straight winning season for Mike Tomlin, and his teams are ready to play at this time of year. And as you said, Q, the roster is kind of deficient in terms of quarterback. Maybe they'll get Pickett back, but he wasn't playing that great to begin with. Rudolph was protecting the football, consummate game manager, had no turnovers. And as you said, that offensive line that's built to maul people, that's what they did. They're moving people up front. And then that Seattle defense that's kind of smallish and fast,
Yep.
they just got dominated at point of attack. So big win for the Steelers. I think their win and get in coming up this week in their game. They're playing Baltimore. They're going to play
Cool.
Baltimore on Saturday in the first game. They're in Baltimore. Baltimore's locked everything up, so
Locked
that's going to be
everything up.
interesting. Yeah, so does Baltimore even put anybody out there? It's probably going to be Tyler Huntley and a bunch of backups. But the Steelers quietly a team pushing into the playoffs. But as you said, Seattle, very bad loss for them. And then you had Green Bay seizing the opportunity this weekend, and they possibly could step in that number 7 spot.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the Packers playing this well, and Jordan Love looked really good. Minnesota, they lost Cousins, then they flip flop, and we thought it was going to be a great story with the backup in Dobbs, and here you go. But the Packers put up 33. They can go on the road and win. And then, I was also thinking about this too with these young quarterbacks. I'm getting more and more impressed with Justin Fields. And don't look now, Chicago's 7-9. So they basically have played themselves. When you think about the draft position, the way Fields is playing, I think this is crazy, but you might see them shop him and still try to get a quarterback or do something with that draft pick. So they got the big win over Atlanta. That's going to be looking for a quarterback. Do you think the Bears, if they bring back their head coach, is going to try to trade Fields?
It's interesting because it does Eberflus come back, Ryan Pace, their general manager. It's seeming like it's leaning that direction, which is crazy as can be after we were talking for so long that they were doing so bad. I was debating this with my son, going back and forth. Do they keep Fields as well as he's been playing? He's one of those guys. If he got an offensive minded coach, say they do change coaches, somebody or a new coordinator, somebody in there that can devise an offense around him, I think he could be a good weapon. But I think Q in the end, like you said, they're going to trade him to somebody possibly like Atlanta or something like that. That's where he's from.
Ugh.
And then they'll probably bring a Caleb Williams and Drake May, a younger quarterback, rebuild there and go with that guy. And then they also have another first round pick as well. So, Chicago, it's a good situation for them. They're getting a lot of money off to the cap that they had this year as well. So, can they build that team? But is Ryan Pace, the general manager, going to be the architect for that situation?
All that talk about Arizona moving away from Kyler Murray and the head coach. I mean, think about it now. They'll probably draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and give that kid another weapon. I mean, it's amazing what happens with a win like
Yeah.
that against a former team on the road. Big spot for Kyler Murray. I mentioned Jacksonville, the Texans, Seattle, Denver. I mean, listen, the Chiefs did get the win over Cincinnati. I'm still not 100% sold on Kansas City. I think they have too many holes. Their offense scares me. They're too inconsistent. But I do want to get your thoughts on what transpired with Denver getting the win over the Chargers 16-9. And obviously sitting, let him marinate, not cook. Russell Wilson. It's funny because we want to start to kind of pigeonhole him and stick him with certain teams. And what I'm hearing out in Denver is that they basically have always liked Stidham. And that seems to be the guy Peyton wants going forward. But man, I'll tell you, the way this is kind of played out, I mean, I'm not the biggest Russell Wilson fan, but I really feel like Denver really did him ridiculously dirty here.
Yeah, and they had those closed door meetings. They tell him to take away this and this contract and that. Well, they gave him money. You may say it's the old regime and John Elway and or whoever it was, and the old owners of the team. The Bolin family. But this was their guy. They went into the season with him, and I think Q they had a plan in place. Like, okay, we're not going to be that good, but he started playing well, and they started winning games, and he was doing a good job. So they said, you know what, let's bench him. They don't want to pay him. Him and Sean Payton, Sean Payton's kind of prickly to begin with.
Yeah.
Do they get it along with one another? And you saw a couple sideline dust ups where they weren't on the same page and everything like that. And yeah, Russell Wilson is going to be in another situation, and you can't. Stidham's just not a starting quarterback in the National Football League. I watched enough of
Yeah.
him. They can go into season with him all they want. He's going. He's a guy that'll get you about 6 wins a season. So
I feel
you
like at
know,
this, I feel like Russell Wilson at this point is going to be a bridge quarterback. You know,
yeah,
two
somebody's
year.
going to look to him, Q. And we start talking about landing spots. We know the quarterback carousel, and you and I'll talk about it all season where all these guys are going to land. There'll probably be about 10 new quarterbacks around the league, whether it's a youngster or somebody else stepping in a new situation. But think about a team like the Raiders. They love that vertical deep ball, and that's what Russell's always succeeded at, and it'd be indoor situation, and they're going to be looking for a new quarterback, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him out there. I know he's 35, 36 years old, and he's a little beat up more physically than he was in his younger Seattle days, but he can still play. And yeah, it's an ugly end there with the Denver Broncos, and it's the Sean Payton show. He's now ingratiated himself to the Walton Penner family who owns that team, and they're going to let him go forward and build his team. And obviously, he does not want it to be with Russell Wilson, but they're going to eat a lot of dead money next season. I think it may be as high as almost like 60, $70 million of dead cap space after they move him.
And I think everything blew up, right? You put all your eggs in one basket, kind of like the Jets did with Aaron Rodgers. Look exactly what Denver gave up. Seattle fleeces them. Hackett was a disaster. Hackett gets fired, right? Think about this. Hackett gets fired. If Hackett never gets fired, is Aaron Rodgers wearing a Jet uniform?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And would they decide, a year early, say maybe he goes to Denver or something like that. You know, but it's crazy how everything kind of circles around during the season. And we were talking about all along, well, we know Russ isn't their guy, and when he was
Yeah,
underperforming, it's like get rid of him now. And I think quite frankly that Peyton wanted to bench him earlier, and
agree.
then he got hot, and they have a very good defense. Vance Joseph did a nice job coming back there and picking that defense up, and that defense started winning some games. And all he had to do was be efficient, make a couple throws here and there, which he did. But you could see there's that disconnect. And it's funny, they didn't tell him to go away. You remember kind of what was it, Carr last season with the Raiders, they told him to go away, but this year he kind of humiliates Russ further. He said, no, you be the second string to Stidham of all
Yeah,
people.
which is
You
kind
know,
of bush league. It's kind of bush league. I
yeah,
mean, the head coach is kind of a prick, to be honest. They kind of,
yes.
I mean, it's just you saw it in the off season, talking about no more, private parking spaces and this is what we have to work on and this and that. I mean, it's like, all right, man, like
And
you've
he's
embarrassed the
one of
guy
those
enough.
coaches. Yeah, Q, and he's one of those coaches. He's like Belichick. He thinks you got to kiss the ring, and he has that Super Bowl championship, and it's all focused on him. He's the star, and they traded for him. Let's not forget that they
That's right.
traded with the Saints for their head coach, and he wants it to be a show. And let's see if he can do it. I don't think he can by making moves like this, but they have a lot of work to do there, and they're still chasing the Kansas City Chiefs, who won their eighth straight AFC West title. So the Chiefs own that division. Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes.
I do want to ask you one question before I let you get out of here on Mike McCarthy. Going back to that game last night, my buddy is a diehard Cowboys fan. He kept texting me and he's like, "Are you effing kidding me?" Like, what? I'm watching this game unfold. They're throwing when they should run, and they're running when they should throw. I feel as though they're winning once again in spite of Mike McCarthy. Like all you have to do is run the football, and you milked the clock last night instead of throwing it or the other night and then giving Detroit another possession. I mean, are these? And it's really not so much McCarthy. I feel as though, like, okay, perfect example, Dayball yesterday the Giants are hanging around, and you get Taylor who's trying to make some plays. Even though it was horrible, he couldn't connect with Saquon. And by the way,
Oh,
Barkley's gone. He's beyond disinterested. Bye. See ya. Goodbye, number
yeah.
26. Have a good career. But anyway, you've got that play with Taylor where he scrambles for 35, and then Dayball runs a friggin' draw with 35 seconds left. Are these coaches dumb? Are they just overthinking? Are they trying to get too cute? Are they is the moment too big for them? I mean, it's just common sense. You're not running a draw there. And if you're Mike McCarthy, you're certainly not throwing the football to stop the clock and give it back to Detroit.
And Q, a lot of years people killed like Belichick and Parcells, these old school coaches that wanted to shorten the game, use their defense and play smart, the physical team. And now, as you said, everybody's trying to be cute, smarter than the average bear,
Yep.
like Yogi Bear, and I always used to talk about it with Andy Reid. He would get too cute in the red zone and in key situation. And in football, it's a game of possession. So you got to shorten the clock. When you don't have a lot of time on the clock, just keep it rolling. And they try to throw the ball, and the quarterback may get pressure, he throws it away, and it stops the clock, leaves enough time for the other team. And that's what exactly happened with the Eagles too, with the Cardinals. They gave Kyler Murray that time, and we're seeing that too often with these coaches. They get too pass happy, and that's what Dallas was doing. They got away with it. Yes, CeeDee Lamb is their best player, but sometimes use your brain. You got that big offensive line, and yeah, Pollard's not running the ball like Zeke was in the past, but just keep the clock rolling, and then trust your defense and make them have a longer field. But a lot of them say, "Oh, I can pass for it on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1." It's crazy. Nobody wants to be that physical, and everybody yells at the Eagles for the tush push, but that keeps the clock moving.
Yeah. Yeah. They might do that play every single time, pick up 100 yards that way. I mean, because their offense has been beyond unimaginative and creative. Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game, Broad Street Salvo on X at Lloyd Vance. When is the show airing this week?
Sure, I think we're going to try to get one in on tomorrow and recap some things and
Good.
just starting the table for week 18 and move into the playoffs. So I'm excited for the real games to start. I know we've been talking about it and get some of these teams, that are kind of fraudish out of the picture.
You might not have to wait too long for that, my friend. So, all right, we'll do it again on Friday on Q, but always appreciate a couple moments, pal.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.